Thank you everyone for joining Silicon Valley Design Thinking Club event. Our club is open community of innovation practitioners who decided to drive changes either within the organization or within industry and eager to learn. Our mission is to increase the percentage of successful innovation ideas, and we are open to help you with knowledge, equip with knowledge and skills. So if you are new to our club, please you can look at the website SVDT.club and join our Slack community, so you can ask any questions about certain practical suggestions or recommendations, or you could share your experience so you can learn from each other worldwide. I would like to thank today our team who created very great banners, spent a lot of time with promotion and marketing. So thank you, Lena, thank you, Galle. And today we have exceptional guests, Greg, Galle, and Mike Byrne, who are the founders of Think Cron methodology, which is great methodology of ideation and innovation. It has myriads of powerful techniques, and I hope we can learn some of them today. I personally encountered the Think Cron techniques maybe 2 years ago when Valerie Riviera hosted an event with our club. So I was really intrigued by what I learned and decided to pursue and learn more, and found and was fortunate enough to participate in the masterclass exactly last year in Washington, D.C. With Greg. So I'm really pleased to welcome Greg and Mike today. I really appreciate that you found the time to join and share your experience with us. So thank you. We are eager to learn. And I stop sharing and hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Pavel. For those of you who joined a little later, if your chat is clear right now, people were putting where they were coming in from, so we have a nice representation of people from around the world. Thanks for joining. We are Mike and I, as Pavel mentioned, are the co-founders of a company called SolveNext, and Think Wrong is the one of the problem-solving methodologies that we utilize. So we're gonna introduce you to that in a little bit of a hands-on way. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get you into a tool that we're going to use just to do a little bit of interactive work. So I'm going to send out to you, first of all, some key commands in the chat, that just a suggestion to open up in your browser, to open up an incognito or private window. Depending on what browser you use, you'll have some key commands there. But go ahead for doing that. That should get you a private or anonymous window. And then once you have that open, go ahead and we're going to have you, let's make sure I get you the right one. We're going to have you paste in a URL here for accessing the interactive agenda for this session. I might have to do that again. As you know, those of you who've been using Zoom, if you join late, you don't get the previous chat. So we'll send this back out in a little bit for folks who join a little bit late. And I'm going to share my screen for those who can't actually access the guide for one reason or another. Sometimes people are behind a firewall and they're going to have some difficulty. So we're going to do an introduction through a hands-on exercise. And then Mike is going to talk us through this hot zone conversation around what it takes to, once we've generated ideas, how do we move those ideas from hypothesis to something that's real and operating in the world, and what kind of criteria do we use with our clients in helping them guide that decision making all the way through. And then we'll end with some open Q&A for you. But I want to encourage you, if you have a question or if something's not clear, feel free to come off mute and interrupt and say, Greg or Mike, I don't understand, or send something in chat. I sometimes get pretty immersed in what I'm talking about and what we're doing and don't always pay attention to chat. So it's good to just interrupt me and say, hey, try to explain that or make it clear. If I can, I'm hoping that everybody who's in the session right now has been able to paste that URL into a private window or an incognito window, and it has the agenda showing up on the left hand of your screen. If you do, what I'd like you to do is go ahead where it says DPAR, that stands for Deflection Point Anchors and Rockets. It's a framework and a couple of exercises that we run together. So we're gonna do those together. I'm gonna ask you to click on the little right-hand pointing triangle, and that will reveal a group poster. So that when you click on that, it'll point down, and then there's a little group poster. Go ahead and click on that link for the group poster, and that should get us into the poster. I'm going to see how many of you actually make it in here, because you should start to pop up soon. And as you come in, I will say a couple of things to help you with to improve your view. In the view menu, you can see that this is basically a Google Doc that's integrated into our tool. So underneath where it says DPAR, under the view menu, go in and turn off these things like print layout and show ruler and show outline document. Google likes us to see all those things, but they're not helpful. And then you'll see also in the little toolbar next to the paint formatter, it says 100%. That's your zoom feature. If you click on that and switch it to fit, that'll get you a better view of what we're doing here. So at this point, I see that there are about 12 of the 26 of us who made it in here. I'm going to share my screen for those who are having a little trouble tracking. I'm going to share my screen so you can follow along with where we are. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, and again, the link is there to get to in the chat to get to this screen that you're seeing right now. Somebody has clicked in and turned everything green. So if you could just give me a click on your cursor, that will deselect. Somebody has selected all. All right, thank you. So the first thing we're gonna do this exercise together. And the question I'm going to ask in this is at the very top. It repeats. There's a series of these tables, so you can find a cell to work in. You can work in a cell with somebody. The first thing we're going to do is look at what is it like to actually lead and facilitate thinking, design thinking in your community, organization, society. So as you as a design thinker apply design thinking in your world, what's that like? The first row here in these tables is who matters most. So who's the constituent, who's the person or the type of person that is most important to you when you're trying to do design thinking? Who are you thinking about here? So for example, I'm going to type in that first one, the user, right? So that's kind of in a user-centered world, that's a kind of constituent. So go ahead and in this row, and you can scroll down. I see some people, yeah, my client's client, very nice. So you can scroll down. There are a number of these tables that are repeated, so you can find one to work on. Somebody has users and shareholders down below. So I'm going to actually, for that one, I'm going to take shareholders and I'm going to put them into the column next to users so that you have users separate. So go ahead and put in a unique constituent in each of these cells, if you will. And we'll give you a second to fill some of those out. And I'm going to add a few extra tables just in case people want to go a little bit lower. Oops. So the first thing you're doing, we're just identifying who matters most. When we are leading design thinking, when we're facilitating design thinking, who matters most? Who are the people we really think about? So I've got in one of these tables, I see somebody's put 4 different constituents into one. So I'm going to move some of those over to other.
So you really want only one in a box, right?
In a box, yep, one in a box. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. Because we're going to get, each of those constituents is going to get their own little table built out for them. You can scroll up to top. We've got four or three boxes available in that top table. We've got 3 boxes in the table below that. So as you scroll up and down, you can be getting those in there. That's great. Company partners, company employees, clients, end users. We got that a few times. Customers, we have a few times. That's good. Concept or designer, good. Business stakeholders. All right. So once we've done that, I want you to, when you've identified a constituent who matters most to you, what I want you to do is look down in that table to the row that's labeled predictable path. So it's number 1, predictable path. And what I'd like you to do is for the constituent that you like, whoop, somebody do it, command and undo.
Yeah, Control Z. Yeah,
Control Z. Yeah, thank you. There you go. So in the row labeled predictable path, go ahead and describe what's it like today. What's the good, the bad, and the other kinds of experiences that constituent is having today with design thinking. So for the constituent you identified up above, like the user, what's it like for them today in terms of design thinking? So, you know, confusing might be an example. Oops. So go ahead and start to describe what that's like for the constituent. Okay, no such experience. That's good. For general stakeholders, fun but no longevity. Not sure what it really is, but use it as a buzzword. Good. Confusing, frustrating. Get the team together. So, and we say the good, the bad, and the otherwise. So there can be negative experiences, it can be positive experiences, it can be neutral experiences. As many ideas as we can here. This is good. Stressful, yeah. Not sure what their problem or pain point is, yeah. Memorable, functional, good. Collaboration, idea for innovation. Lack of resources or requirements can't be articulated. That's good for business stakeholders. For the person who's on the top table, we have in that right-hand column, outcomes not exciting. I'm wondering who your constituent is. Who do you have in mind? Who matters most? Who would you put in that top box? So who are the outcomes not exciting for? Let's think about who that is. Who's having that experience? Yeah, no cross collaboration. All right. So as you're generating some of those predictable paths, you can keep adding those. I also want you to think about now right below the constituent in that row that's labeled number 2, bold path. If you described in 1 what the predictable path is, start to describe in the bold path what your most aspirational experience is. What would you like it to be like for that constituent? If it could be anything, if you could wave a magic wand, if you could somehow transform the experience, what would you want it to be? What are you hoping for and wish it could be every time? So go ahead and add those. Fun, exciting, inspiring, good. Okay, yeah, and I see some still developing predictable path descriptions. That's good. So we'll improve the process that we're applying the methodology to. Collaborative, so under the governing ecosystem, I see that. Empowering, giving knowledge and pushing people to seek more ideas. That you're using it throughout the entire process, not just ideation. A really good point, that it becomes standard practice. It's not just to come up with ideas. Under business stakeholders, a nice list here of building a high efficiency and productivity, cross-functional collaboration, every level of organization brought into the company's strategic vision, learning culture, innovation and delivery excellence. Your framework that allows for creativity. Generate cost reduction and best practices. All right. Excellent ROI, a win-win solution, success and growth in the company. So we have some good aspirations that people are identifying. Down at the bottom set of tables here, a good disconnect between vision and execution is in the predictable path, requires multiple iterations, rounds of edits, good. It's at when it says expected. Go ahead and if you want in that one, add something to the bold path. What are your aspirations, that sort of dream state that you'd like to have? If the predictable path is our current state, then the bold path is our to be or our future state. What would we like it to be like? Go ahead and build a little bit more there. And then I'm going to ask you, keep doing that. We can keep adding there. I see some nice things here underneath the like commercial team at the top table, a good list of bold path aspirations. I want you to, in row 3, where it says anchors, start to identify what are the obstacles that reinforce the current state, that reinforce the status quo. What keeps us stuck on that predictable path? What are the factors that get in the way, that hold us back and keep us from achieving that bold path? Go ahead and add some of those. Like absence of knowledge is an anchor. Good. Impatience, C-suite's mind changing. Fear, yeah, fear's a big one, right? No one wants to stick their neck out. Fear of failure. Restricted time, big obstacle. Good. Everybody's focused on keeping the lights on, lean teams, lack of resources, manual or outdated processes and technology, resistance to change. It's a good business stakeholders column is getting very rich there. Routine, yeah, hard to break the patterns of behavior, resistance to change, process orientation. Okay. Good. Stuck in their old ways, right? We don't do that around here. So let's keep adding there, and then I'd also like you to add in the column that's labeled number 4, where it says rockets. Just like we identified obstacles that keep us stuck in the current state, what are some rockets? What are things that you've seen work or you've done yourself when you're leading design thinking that actually help accelerate to get to that bold path, that would help us get up to that future state? And they could be mindsets, processes, practices, policies, tools, anything that you experience that you think, well, these are really helpful in terms of getting us up to that aspirational state. They help us overcome those obstacles and accelerate our progress. So go ahead and add any rockets that you've got firsthand experience of, or that you've observed other people using and thought, well, I'd really like to try that. Preparation is a good one. Yeah, small wins and success, small steps forward. Okay, so kind of bringing people along with you. Increased usage, ease of use, worth talking about and sharing with others. Yeah, so the fact that people get more comfortable with it and want to tell other people. That's great. So here in the business stakeholders, we have high efficiency and productivity as our cross-functional collaboration on the bold path. Some of the rockets to get there: process streamlining, knowledge base, change management, team development, applying the 7 habits, building strong professional relationships. Yeah, thanks, Deborah and Pavel. I saw you respond to that. It's fine if there's some duplication. Don't worry about that. It's good for just I want to give everybody a chance to sort of dig in and build some things out here. We can always consolidate later, but it's good to get as many of you hands on with this. So I'm gonna leave this. This link is gonna persist. Your access to this will persist after the session today. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what we're doing here, but I wanted to jump in and get hands on and think about this, capture some of our experience, some of our collective wisdom. And I'm gonna ground this in thinking wrong. So I'm gonna stop sharing that screen. And I'm gonna go ahead and, excuse me, I'm going to share my iPad for a second and just draw a little picture here of what's going on. So let me get that up. All right, now I think you've got my iPad in front of you. All right, so
Yeah.
Here we go. So the thing that what we're doing, that drill is called deflection point anchors and rockets. It's actually two think wrong drills combined. And if you want to look at the underlying instructions, I'll show you where they lie in a little bit. But the basic idea in thinking wrong is that we're on a predictable path, and that predictable path is one where we can pretty much assume what the outcome is going to be. That it's if things continue the way that they are, and that's what we described in that row labeled number 1. If nothing changes and continues the way they are, we can pretty much predict what it's going to be like, what the outcome is going to be. And when we try to deflect from that path, when we try to forge a bold path, we are often met with resistance. And we started identifying some of those anchors, some of those things that actually hold us down, that keep us stuck on that predictable path. So as we were looking at this, we were identifying anchors that are have their own weight, that kind of keep us stuck in the status quo. And then we identified some rockets, some things that could actually get us up onto that bold path. So we were building this picture together using that tool. In thinking wrong, what we look at is that we're actually overcoming two major forces when we try to move off that predictable path and up onto the bold path. The first one that we're dealing with is how our brain works. So there's a poorly drawn brain for you right there. We'll go ahead and give it a little pink, so at least looks a little bit more like a brain. But the thing we're dealing with right there is biology. So the way our brains work is that as we learn something, we make a set of synaptic connections, and those synaptic connections create a neural pathway. And that neural pathway then is there and retains that knowledge. So for example, if we've learned how to tie our shoes, we don't have to relearn how to tie our shoes every day. We've got a set of synaptic connections that just automatically fire and let us do that. The problem is, while that's a brilliant design in terms of how we function in the day-to-day world, when we're trying to solve a new problem, we're dealing with that set of connections, that set of synaptic connections that are predetermining what the outcome is going to be. So while our brain is thinking right, we actually need to trick it into thinking wrong to consider new possibilities. So the first anchor that we're dealing with when we're trying to get on the bold path is the way our brain actually functions, the way our brain works. The second thing that we're dealing with is a collection of brains operating that way. And if you have a collection of brains operating that way, what you actually have is a culture. And a culture is going to define what's okay, what's acceptable, and what's not acceptable. So not only does our biological function keep us from pursuing and exploring this bold path, but cultures react to things that are off of the predictable path, that are outside of the norm, as being abnormal, as being weird and strange, and they resist and defend against those things. So while we are leading design thinking activities, while we're leading innovation efforts, we're often trying to forge these bold paths. We're trying to depart from the status quo, depart from the norm, and we're dealing with these two forces that we have to counter somehow. In both cases, biologically, our brain, and cultural, our societies and cultures and communities, operating this way, it is actually a healthy function in many cases. It's how cultures persist and maintain themselves. It's how we don't have to relearn basic things every day. But when it comes to innovation, when it comes to coming up with new ideas, when it comes to trying new things, testing assumptions, being experimental, exploring and discovering, they can conspire against us. So at the heart of thinking wrong is this question of how do we think how do we trick our brains, and how do we trick our cultures, our organizations, into exploring and trying new things, and into being risk-taking, and into learning and letting discovery drive the development of something. So I want to just introduce that basic framework to you, and I use the deflection point anchors and rockets to allow you to get sort of hands-on and into the meat of it, and then conceptually to introduce this framework to you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to pass it over to Mike so that Mike can share with you a little bit of when we apply this. I did see in one of the contributions that was being made to the exercise, the idea of using this throughout the entire process, not just at ideation. And I talked about this need to kind of keep tricking our brain and keep tricking our culture all the way through the development of a solution. Mike's going to talk to us a little bit about the frameworks that we use for thinking about how something moves through that development. So over to you, Mike. And you're mute. We're not hearing you right now. So
there you go.
Okay.
I was muted. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so again, kind of what Greg said, that the development and design thinking isn't just about ideation, which is often a bucket it falls into. I'm just going to ask, can you see something called teaching hot zone?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Make sure I'm sharing the right thing. And in fact, there is a journey, and it's a journey from certainty about the problem and certainty about the solution. So when you start, you have high degrees of uncertainty, and the point of the process is actually reduce that uncertainty and increase the levels of certainty or knowledge, or get to a point that's, as we like to say, true for now. And that's a journey. So there's not this idea that suddenly someone says, I have an idea, and then suddenly we're done. It's a lot more complex than that. And as we will describe, there's often parts of that process that are missing for people. So zone one is define. And the first step in that is formulate. And our work over the last 7 years has actually discovered that a lot of problems with innovation and change is actually down to this stage. And it turns out that people or organizations really aren't good at it. And in the formulate stage, what you're actually doing is you're trying to discover problems, but not just discover problems. You have to discover problems that are strategically aligned within your organization, that there is, and we'll get through the steps first, but the criteria of going through an idea. But the idea is that people tend not to spend enough time formulating problems, validating problems, and seeing if they are strategically aligned. So if you're in an organization, you'll often see things like, let's have, idea-palooza, everybody submit their ideas, that sort of thing. That tends to be problematic because it gets everybody frothy, everybody excited, and we don't know whether those ideas are actually strategically aligned? Are they big enough? Are they addressing a real pain? Is that pain prevalent? Is it? There's many questions. So there's a definite problem when people just start coming up with ideas without spending time in this formulate stage. It's not a, it shouldn't take long, but if you don't do it, it's a real problem. So at the end of formulate, what you want is not only validated problems, and you also then want to generate a portfolio of solutions that address them. You don't want to be going very low in option value right now, because the chances are at this stage, you are wrong. And that's okay, because what you're doing is you're saying, if you look where that zone 1 is, areas of high uncertainty. So, you know, if someone comes to say, what's the ROI or the business plan for your idea? You go, I don't know. I can't possibly know. I just don't know enough at this stage. So you need to spend time in that formulate zone. You know, when you've passed that, when you're moving out and you can actually say, this is a real problem. I have evidence for it. This is my evidence that shows it. And another thing that we say is trust in God, believe in God, where God is gather own data. So you have to go out and get your own data. You don't want to rely on what we call AAA data, which is anecdotes, assumptions, and alternative data sources, which is what lots of people do. They'll just say, you know, well, I've had this idea. I discussed it in the cafeteria with my mates, and we all think it's wonderful. We should do it. And my gran says it's good too. So that's just anecdotal data. That's not real. Or they'll do assumptions. You know, your idea is so rich with assumptions that are unproven that it's high risk. It's not real data. Assumptions are not real data. They're starting points. And the other classic we see is alternative data sources, where someone finds data from something else and says, look, this supports my data or my idea. I say, no, it doesn't. You know, it supports whatever they did, but you don't know what that is. So when you leave formulate, you want to do that. Incubate. Now we're moving to incubate. We've got that one idea. We're going to start testing it. And what the thing we want to start testing is the thing that's likely to kill it fastest. That sounds crazy, right? This is where we actually want assumptions. We want to collect all the assumptions about a problem. So for instance, if your solution is, we are going to go to the moon in 10 years. Okay. Kennedy said that at Rice University. All the top people got together for 8 days, and all they did was come up with assumptions. So you can have assumptions about going to the moon, which is your goal and your solution. And you can say, look, can humans survive re-entry? Can humans pee in space? Can humans eat in space? All these things are things you need to know before you go to the moon. But are any of them more critical than the assumption of, can we get a rocket off the ground? The answer is no. It doesn't matter if humans can't survive re-entry if you can't get there. So you have to arrange your assumptions to test them to see how can you kill your idea as fast as you can, which is really weird, because the thing that we often hear is, you know, let's collect the low-hanging fruit. Let's build momentum. Let's not, because that means let's spend a whole bunch of money and eventually we're going to hit the wall. And that's happened so many times in innovation projects that we see. And that's what causes the cynicism. That's why people just don't believe you. And it's their correct beliefs. So at the end of incubation, what you want to do is you want to have actually tested your solution to answer the most critical assumptions around it. And then we want to move into the next stage, which is acceleration. This is the first time your idea hits the market. And this is where you want to start rolling it out to different groups. But again, you're still experimenting. You're testing assumptions. You're testing hypotheses. Often in organizations, we see acceleration is confused with a rollout plan. And that's not the case. It's like acceleration. You say, can you stop in acceleration? Of course you can. Of course you should. If the data supports it. If you've gathered the data says, let's not do this. We've learned something, let's pivot. That's not failing fast. Failing fast is if you just kept going with the data suggesting you do something else. Finally, once you're in acceleration, you've got out, you've actually answered all those assumptions, you've scaled it, you've proved this can scale. Now I'm in a phase of operating. Again, we see so many organizations fail at this point because they never planned for the end of acceleration. The team that got at this point is probably bored. So what they do, they all just kind of vaporize into the world. And within your organization, it's like, who was there to catch it? Nobody. And it just kind of dies on the vine. And everyone goes, why did that great idea never make it? What happened? And it comes down to, that was poor management, poor planning. Like the operational part of your business did not step in. There was no kind of communication in advance. Once you're out of operate, now we're getting this thing going. The different parts of the organization that know how to operate something are running this thing. Now I want to grow it. I want to go to new markets. Maybe I want to expand the product. Maybe I want to do that sort of thing. Did somebody say something? No. And finally, elevate. Elevate is where often we're doing things like relying on brand, relying on relationships, relying on the things that we have and scale to complete. But the idea is that's not done. You're going to have to go back to the start of the process and do it again, because someone's going to come back to you. Any advantage that you have in this market is going to be purely transitory. It's not going to last long. If you expect it will, it won't. Someone's going to take it. Someone's going to find some new angle on it. Okay, so we know that there's a journey. So it's not going to be this one-stop thing, and you should be design thinking all the way. There is a process to this. It's as disciplined as anything else that's in an organization, but right now it's just not, there is no disciplined approach. It's kind of like, let's all get together, throw some Post-its on the wall. Maybe we'll invest in a kegerator for this team and let's hope it happens. And it rarely does. Okay, so when you go through this, there is also some criteria that we think you should apply. I'm going to try and get to those. Oops. Hang on, did I just break your thing, Greg?
No, I'll clear that.
Oh, sorry. That we call the Super 7, and you can get all of these from the tool that we sent the link out to earlier. The Super 7 is a really simple set of criteria that you should apply to everything. If you want to drive successful design thinking, people want to measure it. They want to know if it's going to be successful. Instead of asking for ROI or some business case that you could never, ever give them, what you want to say, you want to show that, look, I am following a procedure and there are seven questions. And if you can answer yes to all these seven questions, the chances of your success are huge in comparison to not answering or asking these questions. So the first one is the strategic fit. So again, this comes back to knowing what your business is doing, the choices that you are making. So the bigger question here is there a strategy? We go into many organizations and ask, is there a strategic fit? And they can't answer the question because they have no strategy, which is a problem. So when you're doing innovation, you want to know what the strategies are. And the other thing is why strategies are important, because this is how you're going to manage your portfolio. We've all been through COVID, which means our goals have changed. There is no doubt. Pretty much every organization's goals have changed. Therefore, your goals require new strategies to address them. There's not just one global strategy. It's like you have a new strategy because the goal has changed. If my goal was to climb a mountain previously, but I had the strategy of packing things on my back and climbing up ropes and all that sort of stuff. If my new goal is cross a river, my existing strategy is pretty useless. I need a new strategy. I need a boat and I need all these different things. And anything that's supporting that old strategy needs to be changed. So this question of, is there strategic fit, needs to be answered again and again and again. Secondly, is there portfolio fit? This is the idea that you're doing many things to meet your strategy. It's like, I'm having a portfolio approach to my strategy. That is how I manage risk. If you've got this kind of hope that your one idea is going to make it, that's pretty high risk. That's often what startups are doing. That's how, the asymmetry of VC investment is. They just do a whole bunch of spread betting. But it's like, how am I going to do these things? Having choices, having options is good. This is why that idea of, here's my idea and this is what I'm going to do. And you fall in love with the idea. That is bad. Fall in love with a problem and come up with a portfolio of solutions for it. And as an organization, you want to have a portfolio of solutions. And that means when you look at it and go, there is nothing in this space, or we're overloaded with answers to this. It's like, you're an airplane manufacturer and you want to go into air taxis. If you have 6 or 7 initiatives in air taxis, it's probably too many. And if somebody comes up with an idea for another air taxi, you can say, no, there's really not portfolio fit for this. And again, the underlying thing is here, you're relying on the fact that your organization understands what it has and understands what it's doing. This is often a very difficult conversation to have with an organization. It's unlikely that they have this right now. The third question, and these are in a very big order, because if you answer no to those, just stop. Just stop right now. Don't waste time. Don't waste capital. Is it wanted? So often you've got the customer desirability is often said, but we broaden that to is it wanted, because it's not just the customer. There's lots of examples where the customer might want it, but there's something in the supply chain or the network that's, they're going to say, no, I don't want it. If you're selling tires, a new sort of tire, and the tire shops don't want to install the equipment, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your clients want it or the customer wants it, because it'll never get out there in the market. So be able to answer it a broad way. Is it wanted? The next question is it doable? So again, this is the kind of around viability or feasibility. Can we actually do this? And as an organization, should we be doing this? Is this the sort of things we should be doing? So again, ask the question, is this doable? And there is a secret 8th question I'll get to in a minute. The second one is it worth it? Often there's this framed as economic viability, but that's not big enough. Worth is a much bigger question than economically viable. You know, is it worth my time? Is it worth something our organization should be doing? If you're a non-profit or you're a government or you're a military, the question of worth is very different. So you've got to understand this. What is the currency that we're measuring against? If you're fighting human trafficking, it's not a dollars and cents question. It's very, you know, what is worth? What's the currency we should measure this in? And again, as an organization, you want to be able to have these conversations. You want to say, when you're saying, you know, a CFO comes in and says, oh, it's not worth it, it's not going to do it. You say, but this builds goodwill with customers, and maybe we've got to take a longer term view. So you've got to have discussions around worth. Now we're on to question number 6. Again, questions that people just usually don't get to because they don't ask. Is there acceptable, affordable loss? What are we prepared to put in place to go further, or what are we prepared to lose? And this is a huge difference between existing large companies and startups. You know, everyone, you hear this thing of big organizations should be like startups. Yeah.
Mike, sorry to interrupt, but I've got a question from Sandeep saying, should we not look at value before looking at feasibility? So should we look at worth it before do it?
You should always do a back of a napkin kind of thing. We have a tool that's called a reverse income statement, or a reverse impact statement. So you want to do these things very early on, but not to the rigor that you want to do it. You could say something's worth it, but if it's not doable, well, it's not worth it. So this is kind of a general order, but you want to do these early iterations on these things. It's not a set of questions you're going to ask once. You want to ask them at different times. And what we have lots of folksy little terms, but one of them is radical enoughness. You know, is it truthy enough for me to keep going? Do I have data support that, yeah, I can keep going on this one? So you want enough of that. So hopefully that answers Sandeep's question that, yeah, you want to do these very early tools that are kind of quick and dirty. Acceptable affordable loss, what can I afford to lose? The difference between a small company, because hell, that's what you're doing. Sure, why not? You know, whereas a big company like Toyota can't just do things. You know, they've got a lot of brand reputation that you can't just start doing stuff. It's like Toyota's new heated toilet seats. It's like, what? That's really confusing. Why would you do that? And then finally, is there real option value? Because from the last diagram we saw, you're working in a space of high degrees of uncertainty. The thing that you want uncertainty is options. So you want to invest in the thing when you've got the greatest uncertainty with the greatest option value, the thing that I can change. And I'll say there's 4 types of options you want to be looking for. There's an option of scale. Will this idea work or the solution work if it's big or if it's small? Can I scale it up and can I scale it down? Does it have flexibility of inputs and outputs, which means can I change what it does? So if you imagine a factory, it's like, do I make a factory that only makes, you know, widget A, or do I want it to be able to do all sorts of things? That's the option of flexibility. I want an option of timing. So is this something that I can speed up? Can I slow down? Can I, you know, put it on hold? You know, you want to ask those questions of what sort of option on timing do I have on this? And then finally, I want an option of exit, which means if this goes wrong, what can I salvage from it on the other side? Maybe it's something, you know, you got to a point you just want to spin out the organization, or maybe you want to say, look, I'm going to learn a lot from this. It's like, look, we're going to learn that insurers will put data in the cloud. Okay, that, you know, you could say that the entire option of this thing is, you know, knowing that in large insurers put data in the cloud, be worth it. That's a great learning from a project. So again, these are questions. And the final question, the hidden question, if you're a leader in your organization, is how do I know? So you'll get lots of enthusiastic yeses to these, but you want to be the enthusiastic skeptic to that boundless optimism that people present to you. And the enthusiastic skeptic is, how do I know? Show me the data. You know, it's like, this is the I believe in God, which is gather your own data. But that's what I believe in. Show me the data. If they just say, is it one? Yeah, it is. Show me. So, you know, have you done customer interviews? Is this a real pain? Show me the scale, show me the extent of that pain. Show me how many people have it. Is it prevalent? You know, is it gonna enough to make someone change behavior? And show me. And at each of those questions, ask them for the proof. What that now does is you're aligning your teams to knowing which data they need to produce. It's not about, you know, a nice deck being presented on a screen with a cool T-shirt like Pavel and Greg have, and, you know, maybe tight jeans that look cool, and go, yeah, that guy has got an awesome presentation. It's about actually taking the time, other than, you know, a 2-minute pitch, and saying, look, is the strategic fit? Is there those things? Show me how. Show me the data. That's how you avoid disappointment and dissatisfaction with innovation and change within an organization or within society, actually applying rigor to it. I think
Mike, Pavel
basically out of town.
Pavel asked if asking the questions actually reduces the probability of innovative ideas. So especially in the group environment, people tend to think or get stuck in the status quo. So, you know, Kodak and the digital camera example. So how does the Super 7 limit the potential of disruptive new ideas? Or
I don't think so. I think something that comes down to, you know, you've got to have a strategy. So if you've got an organization that has absolutely no strategy for change, yeah, they're done. They're dead in the water, right? So, you know, if they're not serious about actually innovating, it doesn't really matter if you have a process in place, because they're always going to kill it. So it's that idea of going in and saying, you know, professionalizing their innovation structures within their organizations, saying, you know, look, is innovation done off the side of your desk? Is it done sporadically? And on our website, actually, if you go to SolveNext.com, go to free resources, there's an assessment in there. It takes about an hour, but it's broken down into 5 sections. And it starts breaking down, it's like how, and for us, that's the foundation. If you're not foundationally set up for innovation, it don't matter. You know, you're not even going to get that far down the line.
I think another thing, Paul, that I like to think about is in the as you're moving through that that space that Mike was talking about, that hot zone space, you're going from all of this uncertainty up to greater certainty. You're asking those questions all the way along, and at the early stages, the answer may be we don't know.
Well, not yet.
But we're making assumptions, and and that's what Mike was talking about. So let's track what the crucial assumptions are, and what we work with our clients in doing is embracing discovery-driven development. So it's to say we don't have to be right; we have to understand what the big assumptions are, and we're going to do discovery-driven growth from Rita McGrath. Then you have to actually use those discoveries to inform what you're going to do next. So it doesn't rule things out. It just says, let's be honest about what we don't know and what we do know. And let's test what are the hardest, most crucial assumptions so that we can progress from there, rather than fooling ourselves because we tested something easy. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So why don't we open it? I think we have, so we introduced the deflection point framework, this idea of being stuck in the status quo, and what it takes to overcome that. Mike started to share this space in terms of what it's like, this kind of messy, discovery-driven early stage of formulate and incubate and accelerate, getting up to where we can operate. And then also, what are some of the kind of criteria? What's the question set that we are constantly asking? We ask those questions because we use a principle that is, we don't want to expend any capital unnecessarily. So we want to make the greatest progress with the least amount of capital at risk. And that could be financial capital, but that could also be intellectual capital. It could be your human capital, your talent, your workforce. It could be your reputational or political capital. So the idea of testing these assumptions and being okay with learning, no, we're wrong about that, right? That was our assumption, but it's wrong. So we need to change course, or we need to stop and pick up another option out of our portfolio and start working on that. That's that experimental discovery driven approach that we're advocating and that we work on with our clients. So a very unconventional or unorthodox approach to developing solutions that's sort of contra to the think right notions about how these things are done. Why don't we go ahead and, if it's okay, let's open it up to the group to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, Greg, I'll also bring up the next cycle. I'll just put it on the screen if you want to wipe that thing off.
Oh yeah, let me.
To kind of reinforce, you know, we said there's a journey through, so we've kind of done as a subway map of how you get from those places. I'll just scroll down the bottom, but you'll see it gets pretty, you know, people think innovation is about ideation or design thinking is about it, but it's not. There's a lot of stops on that route, and every time you've got these kind of validation loops, that's those super 7 questions. Keep asking them all the way through, and you know, you can stop these ideas and go through it, but it's a constant cycle of observation and looping through in order to actually be successful at innovating. And each of these stops is design thinking. You know, you start getting this design thinking happening everywhere along this route. It's not this kind of early stage stuff where people go, oh, I want to do some solution hypothesis generation. It goes way beyond that. And constantly doing it. It's like, how do you do that, and how do you make that part of the everyday discipline of doing design thinking wherever you are in that cycle within your organization?
Hey, Mike, could you go ahead, since you're sharing your screen, can you show people how to click on the links in the agenda to see the underlying
sure.
the underlying content or resources?
I'm hidden. There we go. So you can, to get those, you can do that's on the back side. Clicking on the top link goes pink is a link. You've got the posters here. You've got that Super 7 worksheet. These links may not work depending on license, but you can access it through there.
All right. So let's go ahead and open it up for conversation, thoughts, questions, anything. You can either throw it in the chat or go ahead and come off mute and ask the question out loud.
Yeah, I have a question. So if you think about application of the design thinking in an organization, let's imagine we have an organization that never done it before. So what would be, and they have a fear, okay, that might not work. When somebody in the company had an experience with a workshop that they create something, but it never get to the tangible results. So what is the best way to introduce this practice within an organization, like to become exploratory organization, to hypothesize about a certain idea before you just allocate the capital there?
Greg, start on that one.
Yeah, so I think that one thing it's funny, it depends on unfortunately the answer is it depends on the organization, right? So some organizations are very risk averse or very cautious, are not you know, they're not super experimental by nature, or you know, they just seem to be quite conservative in their approach. In that case, I wouldn't come in and say, hey, we want to think wrong, because your reaction that you're going to get when you say, hey, I want to think wrong is, well, why would you want to do that? You know, nobody wants to think wrong. So in those situations, what we always encourage people to do is, you know, find 1 or 2 drills to introduce, to integrate into a normal meeting, a normal session. Like, so it's going to be a fairly normal day, but I'm just going to try this one thing. So people can have this very different kind of experience. And what we find is it's Mike says it's like going, you can talk to somebody about going to Disneyland, but it's not the same thing as going to Disneyland, right? You got to go to Disneyland and experience it. So it's the same thing, I think, with design thinking or with any of these sort of interactive, immersive methodologies, you have to give people an opportunity to actually try it and do something with it, and to have that lived experience and say, oh, okay, that was great. Oh, Pavel, whenever Pavel comes, he always does this stuff in our meetings, and those are always the best meetings. And so you get people excited about this different kind of approach, and then you can start pulling the curtain back and revealing what it is that you're doing. Trying to sell somebody on, hey, we're going to embrace design thinking and use the methodology, or we're going to think wrong. And if you're in a cautious organization, I wouldn't spend any time on that. I'd go into stealth mode. I'd start to deliver, we have little drills like even the deflection point drill that we ran. If you're doing that in person, some blue tape. Let's just take stock of what our current situation is. Let's describe what that is. Let's put up an angled tape. What are our aspirations? What are our goals? Hey, what's holding us back? As people start to do that and they see the outcomes of it, they then start to, they believe once they see, right? They're not going to believe because hey, I went and I learned this thing and everybody should try it. So it's finding those opportunities to just do something real and not try and sell them on everything all at once.
Yeah. I think then translating it back to that language. So the deflection point anchors and rockets that you've just done, I use that all the time in sales organizations. So, you say, do this with your clients or your prospects. And then at the end, what you say is, what you have is an as is and to be state. And then you say, okay, well, the other thing you have is also success criteria. And you've identified their pains. And as a sales organization, my goodness, that's what you want to go sell to them. And so what you've done is say, I've just introduced design thinking as a radical way of doing discovery in the sales cycle. And they go, holy cow, I never thought it was like that. But then you say, well, if in the old way, if you said, hey, what was your success criteria? And A, they don't know how to answer that question. And B, if they did, they'd lie to you because they'd just be helpful. And they'd just fill in that gap of, I don't know this. So the idea of like, you can get very honest responses. You can show up in a very different way. And you can just do these very small things that are very simple. It takes matters of minutes, at which point now people are willing to work with you. Not, yeah, hey, let's think wrong and let's do I'm a tree, which is a very interactive kind of, what improv. Let's do some improv. It's never going to work. Whereas what I've described, you do it and then you explain what you've just done to them. They go, wow, that's cool.
Yeah. We've found, but when learned through experience, that starting with theory is never a good place to start. Start with practice, and then give people the theory after they've had the practice. So explain what the theory is after they've done it. And then they'll be a lot more interested.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, deflection point, I use it in my practice. I do the consultancy in engineering field, which is like pretty far away from innovation. We have like very structured mind of people who are thinking like there is a only right way to solve the problem. But expose them to the questions about the existing status quo and ask them to explore what might be the bold path. It's like create another opportunity to look around and find the different solutions. It's But
in that environment, Pavel, a great place to start is with assumptions. I find this very high margin work to do with search engine companies in Mountain View. And if you go and say, let's just map all the assumptions that you have right now about your project. No one's ever asked them this. And they will spend massive amounts of time writing assumptions down, a lot. And then they suddenly go, oh, wow, we have a lot of assumptions. Now you have a way in. Because assumptions are okay. You say, look, assumptions are okay. In fact, writing it down, we say light is the greatest disinfectant. Because, you look at how many projects have you seen where it was just built on a false assumption? And, if you do that post-mortem and went down and someone eventually goes, whoa, you thought that was an assumption, buddy. I had no evidence to back that up. And the problem with assumptions, if you accept them, you do two things. One, you stop researching it. And two, you build upon it. And it's really dangerous. So a way in for these engineering organizations, assumptions are a great way in. Let's just say, list your assumptions, list your presumptions, list your knowledge. Let's just put them on index cards because, they like them. And you say, let's do that. That's a great way in for an organization like that.
Yeah, and building off of what Mike says, if they do that, then you can say, so I brought up this sort of the six think wrong practice. There's this practice over here that's called bet small. And bet small would be, let's take the most crucial assumption, the one that if we're wrong, the whole thing falls apart. And what's the smallest experiment? What's the lightest experiment? The small bet that we can make where we're not going to put a lot of capital at risk, but we're going to learn something. We're going to gain some insight, either more confidence to say, keep going. Hey, maybe we think that we feel more confident in our assumption. We're getting closer to knowledge, or true for now, or actually we learn something that changes our understanding fundamentally, and that means we've got to change direction. What, in the Silicon Valley jargon would be, we need to pivot. Well, pivot is simply we learned something that said don't keep going that direction, right? So that taking stock of those assumptions and then jumping into thinking about, all right, let's think about a small bet. What would that look like? What's the smallest experiment we could do? Pavel, you've had experience with Do It on Monday. The Do It on Monday drill is one where you say, all right, you got 5 days, you got $50, you have 2 colleagues, you have 3 resources from the organization. What could you do that would where you would gain greater certainty, greater confidence in that assumption? And so people have that ability to move quickly into action rather than just sitting around talking about it or arguing it or debating it. You can start to do something where you're going to say, oh, now we are more certain. We're more certain about the problem, or we're more certain about the solution, and we're moving up into that space where we have what we think is a good solid working hypothesis about what the solution could be.
Yeah, going back to this point, like exploring the assumption, what I found also like challenging, if you have an idea of the product, right, you start exploring, like create an experiment, expose this product to the certain amount of users, and they have a like questionable result. So it might be great if you have everybody likes that, right? Or no, everybody don't like, but you have a questionable result. I mean, what is when I should stop doing the experiments and like make a pivot, or should continue to?
So this is what we'd call, radical enoughness. What's enough for your organization at that point in time? This is where you definitely get into cultures of organization. What is enough in one organization is nowhere near enough in another one, or in a different context. If you're making missiles, I hope your enoughness is at a very different level to baking cookies. There's just an understanding of, and that's a discussion. So when you going through this criteria, you've got to be able to, that's when you have that discussion of, is it enough? Or do we say it's not yet? Not yet, it's not enough. So you've got to, there's a personal call. And the other situation is that, it's the idea of true for now. So, in statistics or in experiments, you always get a migration back to mean. You've got these results that support you. Over time, new data comes back that doesn't support it anymore. So the idea is that you get to a point that's never right or wrong. It's true for now or not yet.
I also think that, Pavel, in that situation that you described where the result is ambiguous, where we're not, it's not clear. It's not a yes, we love it, or no, it sucks, but it's, we can't tell. At that point, you can step and say, okay, what are our assumptions about why we're getting this ambiguous result, right? So then you say, all right, what are the crucial assumptions about why we have this spread of, some people love it, some people hate it, some people are indifferent about it. What's going on there? And so you actually change the experiment. Now we're going to test a different assumption. We're going to make an assumption about, well, maybe what we were testing was whether or not somebody liked this particular set of functionality in this particular sequence. But what our assumption now is that it takes too long for people to even do it to get to a meaningful result, or it's, there's something about the technology we're using to deliver it, or there's something about the time of day when we're actually, so are we going to start to probe on different variables? In that discovery driven approach, when you're thinking right, you're focused on things like, are we improving the productivity? Are we improving the efficiency? Are we taking the cost out of, you know, you're focused on all these things where hey, we've got a lot of certainty around what the problem is. We have a lot of certainty around what the solution is. So we're going to focus on optimizing how this thing works. When you're thinking wrong, you're in this experimental, discovery-driven approach, and you're going to be willing to test a lot of different assumptions and to be open to learning new things, right? The emphasis there is on how wrong can we be?
Hey, Greg, and related with what you're mentioning about the assumptions, I'm I'm running now a project where it's a multidisciplinary project where many departments are there. As you say, we start with many assumptions, and then what we decide is to have the interviews with the different departments to clarify that assumptions. But every time that we say, okay, we clear that assumption, we get new assumptions or new questions from one or other department. So I feel good doing that findings. I feel good getting more information. But sometimes I think there should be a point that we need to say, okay, it's good enough now. We do not need to clear more assumptions. We need to keep these ones and get a solution. No? But so I'm not sure how do you, is there a way to define that point? Probably it's not the easy one.
I think so. So, you know, not all assumptions are equal. You know, there's you know, how big is it? You know, how you know, is it critical? So we have, I haven't got the tool with me, but basically you need to score your assumptions just as you would anything in an agile environment. So you're actually ordering them, you're sorting them on various levels. So, you know, you can do it on a spreadsheet or on a team. It's just like, look, here's the assumption. It's just like, this one, I admit it's an assumption, but it's just not big enough to stop us going forward. But the idea is that you have it out there and it's documented, which is, you know, good, because, you know, it's that idea of shining a light on it gives it reality. So it could be a big assumption, or at least as a team, as a leadership team, you said, we saw that assumption and we did not think it was crucial enough to answer. That's okay. You know, it just lives there as an assumption that still exists. But yeah, I think you're right. You don't have to answer every single assumption. That'd be crazy.
And I think this point that Mike was raising, is this idea of T-shirt sizing. So what are the critical aspects of the assumption, and then starting to rank them and saying, okay, we're going to only pay attention to assumptions of a certain magnitude, of a certain order. The rest we're going to ignore, because it could, as you said, it could be infinite, and you need to sort of set a threshold.
Yeah, I think in some point we need to say, okay, we are going to work with these assumptions, and then the next assumption or the next clarification is going to be a different project, probably, no?
Yeah, I think that's fine to say. We are going to work with these assumptions, and we've said that's okay.
And this is a very nuanced thing, but Mike talked about, we had an exercise called PAK, P-A-K, presumptions, assumptions, and knowledge. And a presumption is basically an assumption that we're just going to grant as being true. Like, for example, if we're building something on AWS, we're going to assume that AWS is going to be there in 10 years. We're just going to presume that's true. We don't know for sure, and we're not going to test it, right? So there's some things we're just going to presume to be true. We're going to put them over there and agree. We presume those. Now, some things are presumed to be true. In our recent experience, like if we just flash back to the beginning of 2020, there were some things that we would have said were safe to presume, like that we'd all be able to get on planes, right? We'd all be able to be in a room together, that we'd all be able to, there's a whole bunch of things we presumed to be true. And something significant changed. And then we said, oh, now those things that we presumed to be true are no longer true. We now have to change our assumptions, right? And that's fine too. This is it's a lived process, right? It's not static. It's something that does change and is dynamic. I think one of the biggest challenges culturally is shifting to a culture that's comfortable dealing with a certain amount of uncertainty, and an approach which is about being discovery driven, because we're not raised from small children through our academic experience, through our work experience. We're not raised to ask good questions and to say, I don't know. We're raised to have the answer, right? And so that uncertainty is something that we can be really uncomfortable with, but it's essential for in the innovation process by nature. You're going to be dealing with huge amounts of uncertainty, especially in the early stages. It's predominantly uncertainty and assumptions. And so we have to learn how to navigate and operate in that space.
And like, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe this is another way to look at that, right? You have a different horizons of projects or innovation that you're working on. If it's like, okay, 1 year horizon, then you need to have some results done, then you like can prioritize against these criteria assumptions.
Yeah, we talk about 4 different opportunity horizons, and we actually, when Mike was talking about option value and generating portfolios of solutions, we actually have portfolios of problems, and every one of those problems has a set of assumptions, and then those portfolios of problems ultimately get into portfolios of solution hypotheses and solutions and portfolios of solutions. And there's 4 horizons that we look at. One is which I think is where a lot of us who are in the innovation world are always attracted, which is this renewal portfolio. It's like the reinvention, the reframing, the rethinking of how things are going to be done. And those tend to be pretty far out, right? So the total reinvention of something, 3, 4, 5 years, even longer in some industries, it wouldn't be unusual. If we're reinventing flight, we're going to get to net, to carbon neutral fuels for airplanes. That's going to be, 10, 15 years, 20 years out. It's not going to be 10 months out. So renewal is really exciting. The next portfolio would be growth. That is, what are these problems that we have and the solutions that we have that are going to allow us to serve new markets, serve new constituencies, new communities, with new solutions, or existing markets and existing communities with new solutions. So where are we bringing something new? It's not a complete reinvention, but it actually allows us to expand our reach, to expand our impact. So there's that horizon. That, in a typical organization, sort of 18, 16 months out to 36 months, so a year and a half to 3 years. For really fully functioning, operating growth solutions, that's a time horizon. There's still a fair amount of uncertainty, but not as much as in reinventing something completely. The next portfolio that we'd be looking at is optimizing performance. Hey, we've got a lot of certainty around the problem and the solution, but we're going to actually think wrong. We're going to apply design thinking to how do we improve the performance of that thing. An example I like to give all the time is Levi's. Levi's, the jean maker, they don't make jeans. They make brands. So they don't make the denim, right? They hire designers to come up with cool wear, and they maintain a brand. But the manufacturing of the denim was something they decided to abandon some time ago. So making those sort of decisions about how do we optimize performance, you should be able to do that in a window of anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, 12 months. We should be able to, within a year, we should be able to realize those things. We have a lot of certainty. We have a lot, there are very few assumptions about those problems and solutions, but we're going to test how could we actually, move the needle on this thing. And then the 4th portfolio is a little less familiar, but that one is, we call it the maximize portfolio. And it's how do you maximize the value of something that you're going to stop doing. And so we have a good example of that would be Airbus that made the A380. So Airbus makes the A380, a beautiful, wonderful aircraft with all sorts of amazing technological innovations, but not enough demand for that aircraft. So they're going to stop manufacturing it. Well, they don't just abandon all of the investment that they put into that. The question is, how do we take advantage of the manufacturing processes, the talent that we have, the patents that we have, all of the fuel efficiency that came out of the design of that aircraft, the silencing, muffling of aircraft sound. How do we take those things that we actually invented and make sure that we get value out of it as we stop manufacturing that aircraft? How do we make sure we don't lose our investment? A simpler example would be Netflix, which 13 years ago decided to get out of the DVD business. But they still are in the DVD business. right?
Yeah.
6% of their gross profit comes from DVDs. Well, why is that? Because they're maximizing the value of that business as they exit it, and they're not going to get out of it too soon. So that's another portfolio. And those decisions, those decisions could be made within 3 to 6 months. There's a huge amount of certainty, but then you're thinking about, so how are we going to be smart about how we're going to change, how we're going to actually get out of this? So you're right, that time dimension is really important, and you have different kinds of assumptions and different degrees of assumptions associated with each of those portfolios.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Maybe like last question from my side, like talking about innovations and ideas. So what I also like found kind of challenging is to balance between like day-to-day work and like working on the project, right? Innovative project. It is like cultural clash that is happening, right? If you would like to innovate, you just need to have some time not committed to the results. You're learning, right? It's different type of work, and you have a day-to-day activities, right? Within an organization, usually this is different to find the balance. So based on your experience, what is better actually for the company, to have a spin-off and completely allocate kind of separate team, or try to find a balance within the team?
I don't think you can do it off the side of your desk. I think, this idea of borrowing staff. The other part is that we do believe that there should be professional entrepreneurships. That is a job in the same way that finance is a job, that QA is a job, that all those. So that's a job. As I shared that process on the screen, it's big and it's complex, and each of those steps is a lot of stuff going on. Being able to do that as a practitioner, as a manager, as an executive, that is a job. And, you're going to bring people in to help you in that process and move things through. But I think organizations are starting to realize that that's actually a career choice. It's like, if you thought about your existing organization and you just went there and said, hey, we're looking for volunteers to do the analyst call off the side of their desk, you'd be like, whoa, no. It's just like, oh, we're going to do expense palooza day, and we're all going to go and we're going to do this, or we're going to crowdsource procurement. It'd be absolute madness, and it'd probably be illegal in many cases. But that's what we're doing for innovation. We're expecting people, we're really good at optimizing now and having the organizations, but when it comes to the next bit of the organization, it's like, yeah, just do that bit off the side of your desk. Maybe you should work harder, and fit it in those 5 minutes. It's insane. It's just like, and you've got the statistics that 94% of CEOs are dissatisfied with innovation productivity. It's like, it's because you're doing this. It's if you were like a full-time innovator and were asked to do the functions of a job off the side of your desk, they wouldn't get done and the results would be crappy. So the results that we're seeing are exactly what you should expect. Exactly what you should expect. If people are being asked to do this off the side of the desks, and it's like, what do I do? And what's going to come down to is how you measured for your job performance. What are your KPIs? What are your OKRs and all that sort of stuff? That's what people are going to work to. So yeah, I think you're right. You can't do it off the side of your desk. But yeah, we have a bit more militant approach that this is a career path. This is a choice. This is something that organizations need to invest in. And when you don't do that, the results that people see are exactly what you expect. We were teaching at Columbia a couple of weeks ago at the university, not the country, and I bring up that if you look at innovation performance and how much is invested and what the return on that innovation investment is over the last 20 years, you would have been better off putting your money in cash. The returns on innovation in this country are that bad. It's the lowest performing asset class that you could see, and they've been flat for 20 years. And yet we keep hearing about, look at all this amazing innovation. It's like, well, I like to look at the results, and it's awful. And it's because people are doing exactly what you're saying, Pavel, which is like, we're going to innovate once a month and maybe bring a brown bag lunch, and that's how we're going to do it. It's like, no, you're not. It's not going to work. And I've got 20 years of evidence to tell you that's not going to work. So there's my rant to answer your question.
Mike, and regarding that question as well, if you have a department for innovation, but if you have as well a research and development department, is that kind of a same entity, or they can be separate departments? I don't know if that's my
I think, well, that goes back to Greg's point about portfolios, right? Innovation should be happening everywhere throughout your organization. You should be innovating on performance. You should be innovating on the way out. You should be innovating on growth. All that is innovation. R&D is often about renewal. And, you know, that's what people, it's just like that 5-year performance or doing those things, and it's separated. But again, what we'll often see is there is no process underlying it. There's no systematic way of doing it. It's just like, let's pay for scientists. Like, okay, but you know, are they going through and are they answering those Super 7 questions? You know, is there a strategic fit? Is there a portfolio fit for this work that's been done? It's like, I don't know. When the strategy changes, are we going back to R&D and saying, hey, all those projects, are they still aligned? I think what we find in those departments is that they are, it's not integrated, and it's especially not integrated at a strategic level or portfolios, or why they're doing it, or is it being shared? They're not investing in options on exits. You know, so there's so much amazing innovation is just locked up in patents in companies that never went there. They didn't spin it out. They didn't do anything with it. They're just like, no, not for us.
And I think that there's, Juan, there's a little bit of a sort of from an organizational standpoint, there's a little bit of a matrix here, which is, as Mike said, you might have a department or a group that's focused, that owns a particular portfolio. Like R&D owning the renewal portfolio makes a lot of sense, because R&D's looking out at these sort of longer term, distant horizon initiatives. But there are, across the organization, there are individuals who can have specific entrepreneurial roles and responsibilities. And that's where we talk about this as a career path, is like, there are some of your executives who ought to be very good at managing the portfolio of innovation and at making governance decisions about what are we moving forward, what are we stopping, how are we allocating resources, applying that Super 7 criteria. So you want to have an executive level in your organization that's capable of doing that. We talk about that as next boards. It's establishing a next board. That next board is making decisions all the way through those hot zones that Mike described for each of the portfolios. So you can imagine a set of initiatives in your renewal portfolio that are moving their way through those hot zones. And there's a next board, some group of executives who are making those governance decisions. And you could also have a set of managers who are trained in discovery-driven development, so who understand how discovery-driven development works, how to run and design experiments and take learning and move assumptions over into the knowledge column, and who also know what they need to be reporting up to those executives to make the decisions, the governance decisions they need to. So that can exist across your organization. You just need some of your managers to have that skill set so that they can run those projects. And then you need practitioners. You need people who can staff those, who can be on those teams and actually run those projects. So it's a skill set that you can find. You could take create a department that does it, or you can have people within your organization on different teams who have that skill set and are capable of facilitating the process, participating in the process, and leading the process.
Yeah, and the other thing for R&D is that it has to have that handover, right? So, you know, what's the plan for R&D to get it out of incubation? And is there a team in place for it to pass it on to accelerate this thing? You know, or is it just sitting there as R&D? You know, is that where innovation goes to die? You know, but yeah, there has to be, you know, an awareness that there's that whole process through those zones, and there has to be a plan and management for it to get through there, because often there's a lot of capital at risk by the time it gets out of there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, guys? No questions.
I have a question. Sorry, Pavel.
Go ahead.
Thomas,
Go ahead, Thomas.
how are you? Just top of your mind, if you talk about innovation, which are the companies that come to mind? Like the top 3 companies that come to mind that are the best in channeling all these efforts?
Gore. I think Gore Industries is amazing.
Like Gore Associates, yeah.
Yeah, Gore Associates. I think they've done a great job for a long period of time. Just how they've organized themselves, I think that's incredibly innovative. Greg,
Well, it's a funny one. It comes out of the consumer space, but I admire them in many ways, which is Lego. So, you know, Lego's done an amazing job of continuously reinventing itself and expanding what it's into. It's also a really fascinating organization because of its it's majority foundation owned. So, and the foundation's focus is on creativity. So you have this sort of deep part of its culture, which is based on creativity and altruistic. But then, you know, you've got advanced robotics, you have entertainment divisions, you have theme parks, you have you know, the sort of plastic products we're all familiar with stepping on, you know, so I think that they're a pretty amazing company. And I also I really like it's kind of a niche one here in the States, but Patagonia I think is a really interesting company, again, that combines culture and innovation and durability and building products that last and that have a really positive environmental impact. So I think they all run really well. There's other companies that are, you know, they're sort of boring, but they're really intriguing. You know, we've had some really
like boring, the company of Elon Musk, which is boring.
Yeah, there you go, the boring company.
Not that kind of boring. Clorox, which I think does a really good job of actually managing portfolios of innovation and doing innovation through acquisition. But I think that the Clorox has been building really strong innovation capabilities internally. And they have really well articulated methods and procedures. So, you know, we see this in some companies that are actually running really effective portfolios of companies and doing a combination of you know, the old school innovation through acquisition, but now they're actually building and implementing systems and skilling up their teams to do the work. So it's encouraging, but I do think we're really in our early stages. Mike talked about that in the entrepreneurial readiness assessment that's available on our site, on the SolveNext website. And it is shocking how low the score is across the board. And the score indicates how little systems there are in place, how little rigor and discipline there is. And I think it's because, you know, we have a very romantic idea of what innovation looks like. It looks like, you know, Elon Musk being crazy or Steve Jobs being this brilliant genius. But innovation is really the byproduct of a managed, disciplined system. And there are brilliant people. There are incredibly creative people. But if you want to do it on a repeated basis, if you want to see innovation that scales, if you want to see innovation that achieves the productivity objectives of an organization, innovation that doesn't have huge amounts of capital leakage around it, it requires a system be in place. And I think that we've just never acknowledged that and you know, some of us who were attracted to innovation because it was this exciting kind of wild west territory, didn't want to have systems imposed on us. But the systems can be really beneficial as long as it's not the system that's in place to run the existing business, because that's going to kill your innovation, right? It's going to suffocate your innovation.
Yeah, we spoke to Clorox and we literally left and going, we can't help you. You got it. You nailed it. So that's really, really good.
And I mean, that's a boring company. It's like they sell
make bleach.
Like, come on, really? Swiffers and bleach. It's like, come on, really?
Thank you, guys.
And charcoal. They're also really big at charcoal. What? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course it was.
Thank you. Other questions? If no, let's be time-wise. We really appreciate that you came to us. It was very insightful. Thank you for your wisdom, for your experience. It's brilliant. Thank you very much, Greg, Mike. Really appreciate.
Thanks, Pavel.
Very time.
All right, and thanks to those of you from Colombia and Costa Rica who joined. We see you. We see you. Hi, Diego. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody have a good night. Thanks, Michael.
Bye.